Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this AMF organized by ELS training. My name is David Frederick. I'm here to share with you my experience in managing crisis, having had experiences as emergency response team head for many years and handling many crises, including kidnap, hostage taking, and ransom. So I'll be sharing later a little bit of my real life story as a case study. It's based on actual experience, and I welcome all of you to tap into my experience and to learn so that you can go back and share this experience and learnings with your respective organizations. Like I said, if you remember the double hijacking of 2 Malaysian ships in Somalia, and if you had watched Pascal the movie, the beginning part of Pascal the movie is actually about part of the narrative about the hijacking where Pascal was involved. Then this afternoon is probably going to be an exciting one in this 1 hour. Crisis comes in many forms, but generally it will threaten your organization. When the crisis happens, your organization's reputation, your organization's operations, your organization's finances, your strategic planning, it can even cause loss of life or injury or harm the environment. So here we are, regular people, you and me, we're just doing our jobs, we're doing our strategic planning, we're looking at our KPIs, everything goes on as per normal, and then suddenly, bang, a crisis hits, right? And all this is going to get disrupted. All the planning that you have done in your KPIs and your strategic objectives all going to go out of the window because the crisis is going to take precedence over everything else that you're doing. So understanding the crisis management process and having a crisis management plan is not a nice to have. It's a must do and must have for major organizations and all those who have a reputation to protect, right? But it also means that you need to have a plan because there can be harm to people along the way and also the environment. Not having a crisis management plan, when the bang happens, when the crisis happens, you will not know what to do. Who will do it? How will it be done? What kind of decision making under stress? Because that can cause the crisis to become unintentionally worse, right? And it will create other crises within the crisis. Only by taking swift and constructive action will you be able to save your organization. The crisis management plan describes how your business will react to a crisis, including who will be involved and what they will do. So the plan will strive to contain, manage, and resolve the crisis with minimum disruption to business and zero harm to people and environment. And that's a big result. So today we'll cover these areas, as you see on the slide, understand the crisis management process, gain insights, look at command and control issues, appreciate escalation of crisis, manage stakeholders. I'm going to touch a little bit on all this because time really doesn't permit to dive deep, but you will get a general idea, and I hope that this will give you a lot of takeaways today to take back to your organization. Okay? So what constitutes a major crisis in your organization? So these are the questions that you need to ask yourself. Where you're sitting now in your company, whether it's a hotel or a processing plant or a manufacturing organization, what constitutes as a major crisis in your organization? Who gets affected by the crisis? Who is impacted? Was it predictable? Was the crisis predictable? Was there a crisis management plan? Was the plan tested? Who are the stakeholders that you need to manage, the internal and external stakeholders that you need to manage. So these are the types of conversations or seed questions that must be addressed when we are serious about developing institutional competencies in crisis management, right? So the tendency for all of us in our organizations is, it can never happen to us. It can never happen to my company. It can never happen to my home. It can never happen to our organization. It's a sense of disbelief. We tend to say, it's just fishermen, right? It's just fishermen. Cannot be lah, cannot be. But this is the beginning of the denial curve. And a reason why crisis escalates. Because in the beginning itself, we tend to deny that something is going to happen to our organization. Another point in this thing is that when the captain mentions that, and this is a statement I like very much, and I'm suggesting in an emergency response mindset or crisis mindset, the words, I don't like the look of that. I don't like the look of that is very important. So as we go about our daily work, our daily tasks, in our organizations, in our plants, factories, hotels, wherever, how many of us like to keep calm, not rock the boat, be in harmony, don't bring up issues? But how many of us will actually probe and say, I don't like the look of that. I don't like the look of that. Remember, if something happens, your whole organization is going to get affected, including you and everyone else, right? And external parties. So how many of us actually say, I don't like the look of that, because that is the starting point of any response to a developing crisis. So the first rule of crisis management is over-respond. Over-respond, over-respond. Don't under-respond. If it's nothing, then good. But if something is developing, then you are right on top of it. Okay, you're right on top of it. Don't get caught once it gets worse. So, what kind of crisis that you normally have in your organization? All right, think about the possible crisis that you can have, and just for a moment, ask yourself, I'm not sure that if you all have had a risk register in your organization done or anything like that, but think about what kind of crisis that you have had in your organizations. Now, the possible areas that can happen, right? So if you talk about shopping malls and all that, you can have fire, bomb threats, cyber attack, information loss, suicide of a guest, especially if it's a prominent figure, it's going to come out it's going to go all over social media and in the news. Scandals, right? Recently, there was a hotel, I think somewhere, where there was a big scandal and it appeared in the news. Mass food poisoning, mass illness, gas poisoning, structural collapse, even kidnap and ransom scenarios, right? So for every area of work, there's always something that can disrupt your business and something that can cause a big crisis. And you need to have a risk register for those kind of issues, okay? So, see, here are some actual examples from crises that have occurred in Malaysia. And on the top left, you see a petrochemical explosion, right? Was it a gas leak? Was it a lightning, heavy rain, thunderstorm? Were they prepared for it? On the right, bottom right, you see a ship on the pristine Great Barrier Reef. And this became worldwide news as the ship ran aground and destroyed a large amounts of pristine reef and actually leached chemicals into the water. The good news about that incident, when it occurred, social media was not sort of like non-existent. So all the news actually appeared on CNN, BBC, and the main news media. The bad news in this case, as you can see, the word Malaysia is printed there. And it highlighted to the whole world, the country that was causing all these problems. So we need to be careful on presence when we get out there in the social media space. Then you see something more recent, which is the LRT incident. Many injured, but the response was very swift. And social media was instantaneous. The people on the train were actually sending out pictures, and we were getting pictures on our phone maybe even before the main news, even before the CEO or the chairman or whoever it is, knowing that the incident was happening. So that's the speed at which social media goes today, right? So the good news is, I think the incident was well handled and contained and resolved. The bad news is the press conference. The press conferences could have been better handled, and it caused a major PR disaster for the company. The last item is the greatest aviation mystery of all time, MH370, still unresolved. This is truly a crisis management disaster. And when you talk about crisis management, you need to bring everything to closure, right? You need to bring everything to closure. So risk assessment, not sure. Preparedness, also not sure. Poor monitoring, poor family management, you know, the big hoo-ha, poor media management, lots of press conferences that were really done in a very poor manner. So what is it that can happen to your organization? Has your organization done a risk register? Have they developed a plan? Have they tested the plan? Have they got the right leadership with the right training and developed the right competencies to handle a crisis? Are these some of the crises that you may possibly face today? Right? So I will now play an audio clip. It's the voice of a Malaysian captain calling for help as his ship is being attacked by Somali pirates. Okay, and this is not from the movie. It's an actual real clip. I'll use my own experience in dealing with kidnap and ransom and hijacking for the remaining of the presentation as a case study. I will not be able to cover everything in detail, as it will actually take a few days to do that. I hope I can give you a gist and appreciation of the intensity and complexity, and most importantly, the emotions and leadership challenges one has to face when handling a crisis. Here I am on August 19th. Let me make it right there. All right, and I'm back home from work like anybody else, just like any one of you, right? Hard days at work, you know, looking at all the issues on the table, and I'm coming home and it's about 10:09 p.m. and my wife has just got into bed, and I'm happily getting into my side of the bed, and the phone rings, right? And the phone rings, and the duty manager of the company calls me as the emergency response team head and says, "Mr. David, this vessel is getting under attack." So I asked him to get back to the ship and call the ship and ask the ship, you know, what do you mean by attack? And, you know, be sure of what you're saying, you know, because it sounded really funny and unbelievable. And 10 minutes later, he calls back and says the captain informs that they are firing guns at the ship, and the ship is in the Gulf of Aden, north of Somalia. So now I need to decide what to do, right? I'm thinking, you know, you can take certainly, okay, let's leave the captain to handle it. You know, maybe they just it's just fishermen just firing off some guns. Let's go to sleep. We'll handle it first thing in the morning, all right? Because you're just dead tired, right? Your body might not want to move. But the reality is, if you are an emergency responder, you have to make the move. You have to over-respond, right? Over-respond. So trigger the emergency response team, and our procedures require us to be in the emergency response room within 60 minutes. Within 60 minutes. So duty personnel on duty need to be within 60 minutes of the emergency response room. By the way, that's a picture of a typical pirate vessel going for an attack. That's how they charge towards the ships. And this slide tells you the location of where the hijacking happened. So, as you can see, this is the Gulf of Aden, and the Gulf of Aden is just north of Somalia, right here. Okay, and Europe is up there. And this is where they get hijacked, and they are brought down to a town called Puntland here, and they change crew, and they bring the ship all the way down to this place, the pirate den of evil. And at any one time, you know, there could be anything from 2 to 10 ships all hijacked in this area, and it's really a pirate den, right? So this is a picture of the ship, and it's a chemical tanker carrying highly explosive cargo, which creates a crisis within a crisis in itself. So for those of you who are running production lines or petrochemical stuff, I think all of us understand that bullets and bombs don't get along well with a highly explosive environment. So here is a highly explosive environment, and there were bullets and bombs and stuff like that. So it was a crisis within a crisis for us. It wasn't so clear-cut in the way we needed to handle this, right? So this is how the emergency response center room looks like at one side, okay? And if you are setting up an emergency response center, please remember, don't be stingy or don't be, you know, over prudent, because when a crisis happens, you need to have as much information and support as possible. So you will need whiteboards, you will need TVs monitoring the mainstream media, you will need big screens to highlight and do briefings, you will need so many things, you know, depending on the nature of business you're doing, on what you need to monitor, what do you need to update to the crisis management team, listing down people, you know, getting access to their files, people who are injured. So a whole bunch of equipment to help you manage the crisis, you know, fax machines, emails, and stuff like that. So this is where I communicated with the Somali hijackers from KL to Somalia. And the negotiations are sufficient to say, I can't go into the details of the negotiations because there won't be enough time, but sufficient to say that the ransom was in millions. There were death threats, bomb threats, starvation threats, rape threats, sinking the ship threats, and so much more, right? So an example of a stakeholder map, and basically this tells you of the various, if you're in a crisis management team, you need to manage the hostages, right? You need to manage the pirates, you need to manage the families, you need to manage the media, okay? So I'm going to give you an example of what is expected and what's the reality, right? So, for example, in family management, the families would think we don't want, there must be no harm to the hostages, all right? They're expecting that, okay? They want an early release of the ship and their family members. They want the company to pay as per demanded. They want transparency in information. They want to know everything. But the reality is, we couldn't guarantee anybody that there won't be another death. All right. Here's the plant in the other part of the world in the hands of, you saw the movie Somalians and all that, and how they speak and what they do. We were not sure how they thought, and there was no way to guarantee that anyone else was going to die. Picture of the cabin of the ship, and it became really messy and foul, and they did their business all over the place and ransacked whatever they could ransack. This, would you believe it, is the food that the hijackers eat. So they used to bring these goats on board and barbecue them and have their food. Here you see on your left the control bridge of the ship, all wrecked up. This is Pascal, and here's another picture of Pascal on board. As soon as we release the ship, this is the lookout point for the hijacker. So I'm going to go a bit into a denial curve now. And in the first stage of any crisis, there will always be shock and denial, right? How can this thing happen to me, right? How can this happen to us? Nobody even wanted to believe it in the first day or the first 2 days. And it took a couple of days to actually sink in. And then the organization goes into a stage called disruption. Everything is disrupted. And then there's anger and fear in this stage, right? Anger, why must it happen to us? Fear, what's going to happen to the organization now? What's going to happen? And everything gets disrupted. Your business processes, your customers, your clients, everybody now, we need to pull in people from all the different departments to help out with the crisis, right? So everything gets disrupted. And then there's kind of acceptance. Okay, look, we need to solve this. We need to solve this, and we need to solve it quickly, right? So there's a kind of exploration state on what to do, where to do, how to do, kind of stuff. And the final stage is rebuilding after the crisis, right? Getting things into place, learning from the lessons, doing the right things, and moving forward. So as we approached Hari Raya, everybody was involved. You can see from the structure here, the legal team, the HSC team, the finance team, the media team, the technical team. Everybody was coming together to help the crisis management team to handle this crisis and get out of it. Okay, so it affects everybody. As far as media is concerned, right? Speed of response is critical. As you know, you can see from the LRT incident, it's very fast. It's out there. Unless you have a holding statement already prepared, you're not going to know how to respond, right? And the person who is facing the media doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO or whoever it is, right? Get somebody who has the right tone of voice, the right body language, with can create a positive perception of the whole incident. And think about the audience, right? If you're talking to the family members, you don't want to give a corporate answer. You want to be very empathetic towards their feelings. Be authentic, right? It's a real event. It's a crisis. Be very authentic, okay? People will be able to read through your body language and your words. Don't be forced or trapped into responding to abuses, because that will happen. There'll be a lot of abusive posts or a lot of abusive comments during a meeting with the families or with anybody else, Don't make the situation worse. If you have a factory in a local area, and if you can contain it there, yes, contain, you don't have to issue press statements to CNN and BBC and all that, as it comes, handle it as it comes. But if you can keep it local, let's keep it local. Be the voice of authority and the source of information in the crisis. Never get up in front of the camera without information in your head and try to wing it. That's a recipe for disaster. Don't forget your employees, okay? Your employees are critical. Your employees are the cheerleaders of the organization, okay? So if you're doing drills, if you have a crisis management plan, a solid crisis management plan, and if you're doing drills, and your employees are involved in the drills, it gives the employees confidence and pride that I'm working with an organization that is ready to handle anything. And if it happens, and touch wood, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it happens and when it happens, your employees are going to be very confident, and they're going to face the public and say, my organization is ready for this. right? So they're going to bring about a lot of positive vibes in the media, and they can be your, frontliners who say the right things and create a better reputation in terms of how your company manages a crisis. Be clear and give context to everything that you communicate. Many a times, it's very vague and it's subject to interpretation. And once you go down this road of interpretation, and in social media space today, it just gets blown out of proportion. So you need to be very, very concise and very, very clear when you communicate. And finally, collaborate. Don't live in silos. Have a groupthink mentality. Get ideas. All right. So when we wanted to put out media statements, for example, we'll say, okay, we need to say this. What do you think about it? HR, what do you think about this? Finance, what do you think about this? Commercial, what do you think about this statement? Get everybody to give input back into what you intend to do. So I'm going to play this clip here, of the crisis management room, and that's me actually talking to for companies. This would be the kind of things that you would need to do, right? Firstly, do a risk assessment and create a risk register of all the possible areas in which you could have a crisis. Develop mitigation plans for the risk and monitor the execution of the plans. Develop an emergency response plan, set up a crisis management team, select the right people, train the right people, provide training for the crisis management team, everyone that's involved from HR to finance, whoever is going to be involved in the extended part of the crisis management team, soft skills training, media training, provide resources to manage the crisis command center or the crisis command room. Equipment needs to be available. Yeah, it's, and if your company is struggling with finances and all that, even you can use a meeting room that doubles up as a crisis room, but make sure that the equipment are all there in the meeting room. You don't want to run somewhere to pick up a fax or have the TV outside so people in the room or managing the crisis can't actually see what's on the mainstream media and stuff like that. Drill your procedures all the time. Run exercises. Involve external parties to give an outside in view of your drills. Do a feedback and improvement loop. And battery check. And I like this term battery check because how many of us in our houses, suddenly there's a blackout, all right? There's a blackout and you go and grab the torchlight. Okay, you grab the torchlight and the battery doesn't work. Okay, now there's panic, your children are screaming and all that. So the battery is not working at all. There's no battery check, there's no battery check done. And then if your battery happens to work, after 2 minutes, it just goes black again, right? That means, you're not ready, you're not prepared. So always do a battery check in your organization as to, are you ready? Is everything working? When you really need it, is it working? And then do a post-crisis management strategy on how to close the crisis and try to bring about positive learnings, lessons learned, how to bring out a greater good for the organization and to prevent such crises from happening again.